Good evening, guys. You know what time it is. It's time for tactics. Hey, so welcome back to our chess lesson series. And this is lesson number 3. So, for you new players out there, thank you for watching the Tactics with Trav channel. I'm going to teach you for free how to play chess, and eventually we're going to get you up to a high level. And let's just get started. So, I said on the last video on chess lesson number 2 that I was going to start working with you on tactics. So, what are tactics? So chess tactics are really no different from tactics in any other phase of life. It could be a trick that helps you win the game, or it could just be something that's really well calculated out. So, in what it's doing is it's using the rules of the game to help you accomplish a task. So, like for example, I cleared the board here so I could show you what a tactic is. So, of course, if my king's on the board, his king's on the board, we got to have our kings on the board. But you have all the pawns, knights, bishops, whatever it may look like. But if I have a bishop like this, and let's say we're going to use the rook here. So this would be my dark squared bishop. And let's say that black's rook is positioned here on d6 and the king is on b8. My king happens to be on f2. This would be a tactic. So moving my bishop here to f4 would pin his rook to the king. And so what a pin is remember the rules of chess we went over in the last lesson? You can never expose your king to check. Your king can never walk into check, and addressing check is the first and foremost thing that you have to address on any move. So black's rook would be pinned to the king, so it cannot move at all. Like if you're playing on chess.com or Elite Chess, it will literally not let you move the piece. So if you're in the touch move tournament, like over the board chess, like what this is, if you touch this piece, you'd have to move the piece, but you wouldn't legally be able to. So you just have to lose it on the next turn because remember the bishop's attack diagonally. So this bishop, which is worth 3 points, is going to take this rook most likely, which is worth 5 points. Unless there's a higher level tactic and that gets more advanced where like you might purposely want to lose your rook for a 3-point bishop. But those are things where you'll learn much later on where you'll sacrifice pieces in an exchange, even if it goes against the grain of what we've discussed as far as point values of pieces. So in most cases, like this would be a great move to pin the opponent's rook to their king. So that's called a pin. And bishops, this is an easy way to remember this. I always think of them as pinheads because they have a nice pointy head. It looks, every time I look at it, it looks like a pin. So hence the logo of my Tactics with Trav channel. The bishop is holding a large sewing pin because it pins other pieces. That's what they do. So going further into the pin, like if we go to the beginning part of a game, I'm just going to set this up real quick. Bear with me because we're trying to make this as real as possible. I don't have all the crazy graphics and stuff you can see on other people's channels, but this is very authentic. It's in the basement, Rocky training in the basement. That's what we're doing. And, you know, this is where I cut my teeth. This is where I grind out a lot of games when I'm playing online is in the basement. So hopefully you can appreciate that in the transparency and authenticity that that brings. But from the beginning part of a game, if we open with, say, the Italian game, e4, opponent plays e5, we're playing knight f3, attacking the pawn, knight c6, bishop c4, attacking f7, and they respond with bishop c5. Like all this is book, knight f6, and then maybe we castle or something. Let's say we get a little further into it. So now maybe I go, or he castles, I go d3, and I'm just making up moves here. But let's say he goes a6. Well, talking about pins, a good move in this position would be to pin black's knight to the queen. So this would be a good move right here. Because now black's knight is not going to want to move. Because if it does, like let's say that it goes like this or something, which would be a terrible move, the white bishop could take the 10-point queen. Technically it's 9 points, but 9/10, somewhere in there. The black's king or black's knight would not want to move because they wouldn't want to lose their queen. And so queens and kings are very easily pinned against by a bishop. So that's what a pin is. So now let's get into the next type of tactic that's very basic that you're going to use a lot of, and it's called a fork. So I'm going to clear the board again for simplicity's sake, and we're going to go over what a fork is. All right. So forks can be done by knights. They're done a lot by knights. Bishops can also fork. Rooks can fork. Queens can fork. And even pawns can fork. So literally all the pieces can fork. A king cannot fork because a king cannot move into check. So it's not going to be given the ability to fork the opponent. So a pawn fork would look something like this, where the opponent has maybe a knight here and a bishop here, and your pawn is like this. And because pawns move different from how they attack, this would be a pawn fork like this. So the situation is black has to address it's being attacked twice. It's being attacked by this pawn on its bishop and its knight, so it can't save both. So let's say it moves here because it wants to retake after your pawn takes the knight. It would have to do so like that. So that would be an advantageous move for you because you would basically win one of the two pieces in that pawn fork. So this is in its most basic sense. So a lot of times when you get into higher levels, you're going to be setting up moves to get to this, or you're going to calculate something that got to this, and then you're able to push, say, this. So that's a very common type pawn fork. Another type of fork would be a knight fork, and these are very tricky. These are hard to see. But let's say that black's king was here and black's queen was here. The knight, if it was here, would be able to check the black king there and the queen. So the king always has to move out of check, right? Like you can't do anything until you're out of check. You can't move into check or be exposed to check. You have to address that first. So even though your queen's being attacked, your king is in check and you have to move away. So in that case, white would win the queen. So a lot of times, and knights are one of my favorite pieces, guys. So you'll find people that like bishops better, but I really like knights. I mean, it depends on the position, but knights are very, very tricky. So a lot of times you can get into sequences and calculations where you end up like calculating 4 or 5 moves later if their opponent does something, or maybe you like set it up that way where they have to do that. Then you can fork them with your knight, and then you could win a bigger material piece like a queen, or maybe it's a rook in some cases. So it's a really cool piece. Like starting out in chess, like here's a really basic one that you'll see a lot of, where the pawns for your opponent, if you're playing white, are like this. And this is basically like a starting position. But let's say that your bishop's here and your knight got here. Now, of course, my pieces are going to be on the board too, but I just don't want to take that much longer setting it up. This would be a knight fork where you would be checking black's king here on c7, and black's not going to exchange their queen for the knight, right? Because it's defended by the bishop. So they're going to most likely just have to lose the rook. So this happens a lot in beginners chess where you're threatening the knight fork, and this will happen. So anyway, that's a common one in beginning chess. Another type of fork is a bishop fork. So a bishop fork would look like this. Let's use a light square bishop. I've used a dark square bishop for almost every example. But black's king is, say, here, and let's say their knight is here. So you're in an end game. Maybe your king is like over here, and it's your move as white. Well, what would be a good move? Bishop to c4, check. So when a bishop fork is where you're checking the king like this, but then it's also attacking another piece in the other direction. So if you had it the other way, where like the king was here and the knight was here, and let's say your bishop was here and you checked him this way, well, black's king cannot stay on the diagonal, right? So it has to move. This would be called a skewer. So it's a different type of tactic. So when it's reversed, when roles are reversed, it's called a skewer. But in this type of tactic, this is called a fork. And in this case, it's a bishop fork. So forks and skewers are like uh, polar opposites, but they're both really good tactics that'll come up a lot in games. So the same goes for rooks. So if your opponent's king is here, and let's say their rook is here, your king's here, and your rook is here, what's the best move for white? And think about it in terms of notation, because we've been working on notation as well. Rook to g7 check. This would be called a skewer, because now black's king has to get off this rank, off the 7th rank, to say either the 8th rank or the 6th rank, and wherever it goes, it's going to lose the rook next. So this is called a skewer, a rook skewer. And if you go here, let's say you couldn't pin the rook. You could pin the rook with another rook, but you wouldn't want to, because you would just be dropping your rook unless it's defended. And in some cases, you might want to do such a thing. Like maybe your queen was here and you want to get rid of black's rook. So maybe you moved from here to here, that you could pin in this case, but you're not really winning any material. You're just kind of simplifying the material down in an exchange. So that is something that could happen. Or if you're trying to pin a lesser value piece, maybe you're pinning it here. That's not a fork though. Let's say you're here and you're coming here. This would be a rook fork. That would be a rook fork. So kind of the similar situation to the bishop, where the bishop attacked both the king and another piece and attacked in 2 different directions. That's what a rook fork will look like as well. So that's a rook fork. And then a queen fork is similar to either a rook fork or a bishop fork, except it's a queen. So using our pieces here, let's say it's the bishop. The queen could come here and pin. It could come here and queen fork, or it could go like this, which is a skewer. So pins, forks, and skewers are very, very common tactics, guys, in basic chess. And to recap what we talked about, pawns can fork, bishops can fork, knights can fork, rooks can fork, queens can fork, kings cannot fork because you can't be moving into check. You have to move out of check if you're in check. So that goes for forks. Pins can be done mostly by bishops and queens. But also, so bishops, rooks, and queens can pin. A knight cannot pin. A knight is going to be really good at forking, though. So knight forks are really tough to see, even at higher levels. Like you'll set up combinations where you'll do all sorts of things. Like maybe it's a 3 or 4 move, like forced like combination that you kind of set up so that you could knight fork them or something. That's something that I do even at my level, which is about an 1800 FIDE rated level. So my chess.com is almost 2000. I'm almost there. But online ratings, guys, are totally different from over the board ratings. Much easier to get a higher rating online. But that goes for today's lesson. So keep in mind, like when you're playing your games, that these are real threats that you need to set up and be aware of, even defensively. So even if you're not the one on the offensive side trying to do those 3 pins, forks, and skewers, be aware of your opponent trying to do that to you. So a really common one, like let's set this up again. This is really common in the opening, and I think it's worth, before we end this video, discussing this particular type of pin, because it just comes up so much. Even at higher levels, it comes up all the time. And it's just knowing how to navigate it and how to undo a pin. So I think there's a technical name for it. I'm just remembering it right now. It's called the Metzger unpin. So can't believe I remembered that. It's just kind of a random fact about what it is called. But a Metzger unpin, and I don't even know who Metzger is, so don't ask me who that is. But like, let's say we're in an opening like this, and I came here. We're working on this, and let's say this is here. Of course, I got to move. So let me just make this move here. He comes here. This is common. You'll see this a lot, especially beginner, intermediate chess, even at higher levels. This is a pin, right? We worked on this. This is a pin. I'm pinning the knight to the king. So a way that black could unpin the knight, because remember, the knight can't move. The knight moves, I'm going to kill black's king, and you cannot move into check. So you can legally not move your knight as black. You could unpin it, though, and one of the most common ways to unpin your piece is to go like this with your bishop, and now this knight is unpinned. So now if white takes here, you're just going to take back with your bishop. So most at higher levels, most of the time you're going to opt not to take. There's another good YouTuber, actually a really good one I watched. His thing is to take is a mistake. So probably not going to take this, like in the Rue Lopez, which is another common, really popular opening. White comes out like this, and black usually responds with this. It's called the Morphy defense. Most of the time, white is not going to take this knight. So if they do, you'll learn this too. You'll take with this pawn, because if you don't take with the right pawn, then they'll actually win the pawn. So if that happens, they come here like this. Black wins back their pawn like this. So anyway, we're not going over openings. I just kind of flowed right into that from what we were talking about with pins. But just be aware of pins, guys, especially in the opening, and then not freaking out about it, but knowing how to unpin your piece. Most of the time it's your knights here or my knights here, and it's just not a big deal. So anyway, guys, see you on the next lesson, chess lesson number 4. And we're going to start combining the tactics with the openings and the plans, and we're going to start combining those together so you can start to see how to play good chess starting out. All right, guys, see you on the next video.